In spite of the song that we just sang, and I absolutely agree with the lyrics of it and the sentiment of it, the fact is the last several days have been dark and heavy and emotionally exhausting. A man was gunned down in front of the entire world. A life was taken, a father was taken, a husband was taken, and then there were people that were celebrating and continued to celebrate his death. And I don't know exactly why it disturbs us. I mean, I have somewhat of an understanding. I think that if you're familiar with what I'm talking about, you're familiar because you have watched Charlie Kirk, you have listened to his videos, you've listened to his podcast. Maybe you're familiar with it, but I think that a part of it has to do with he shared the same values, or a lot of the same values with us. Not that we agreed on everything. I would quickly say that I disagree with him on a few points regarding even spiritual matters, but the fact is a lot of his values were our values. And the fact that he was hated in turn means that you're hated, and that he was misunderstood and he's been misaligned or maligned means that you have too, and I have too. And so I think that that's why this resonates so personally. But I want to go ahead and state, and by the way also, social media algorithms keep reminding us that we live in a fallen world that is filled with violence and hate. I have a friend on Facebook that mentioned on Facebook, he said, I'm ready for my algorithm to go back to funny memes and cool cars. And I would say the same thing. Social media, regular media or whatever is flooded with this story, and it's hard to get away from without just totally tuning out. So again, I think that this resonates in a negative way with all of us. But this morning, I want to remind us that there is something far better and far more enduring than evil. Something that overcomes, at least potentially overcomes, the violence of this world, that penetrates the darkness and that outlasts this world. And that subject, that topic is love. And that's what we're going to be talking about this morning. In 1 Corinthians 13, and I would encourage you to turn there, 1 Corinthians 13, the title for this morning comes from verse 8. And so I do want to kind of explain that for just a moment and then move on and talk about some practical things. But in verse 8, Paul writes, love never fails. Love never fails. He says, but whether there are prophecies, they will fail. Whether there are tongues, they will cease. Whether there is knowledge, it will vanish away. Again, though, love never fails. Remember, this is in the context of a congregation. He's writing this letter to a group of people who are misusing, and I would say because of that, obviously misunderstanding spiritual gifts that had been given to them, no doubt by the laying on of his hands. He had been in their presence, their company, and we know from Acts chapter 8 that the Holy Spirit was given by the laying on of the apostles' hands. He was instrumental in their having the spiritual gifts that they had and enjoyed, and no doubt his heart was broken as a result of their misusing these things. But it was a congregation that was terribly divided. We saw that from the beginning of the book, where Paul writes, let there be no divisions among you, but be perfectly joined together in the same mind and in the same judgment. He knew that the problem was division, and it spilled over into a number of things, including spiritual gifts. And that's why chapters 12, 13, and 14 talk about this. And that's why chapter 13, right in the middle of all of these words about spiritual gifts, the main subject is love. It was a missing element in that congregation, and we know by observation that it is a missing element in the world around us. I don't think that any of us believe that the world is so full of evil and violence that there is no one that is good or good-natured or sincere and loving, but the fact is we're reminded on a daily basis that the world is a violent and hateful place. And we rejoice in the fact that this world is not our home. We're just passing through. We are sojourners and we are pilgrims, but the fact is we have to put up with and endure even the evil and the violence and the hatred, right? So 1 Corinthians 13 is a shining bright spot in the middle of all of this. And again, we're encouraged by the fact that love never fails. This morning, I want to just talk about, we're going to put out 3 points, most of them taken from the text in front of us, but something that we need to be reminded of regarding enduring love. So point number 1 is this: love must be our motive. Love must be our motive. Whatever we do in life, it needs to come from a motive of love. Let's go ahead and look at these first 3 verses. Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I have become sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I could remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, but have not love, it profits me nothing. What is Paul saying? I think that a number of things, he's using these figures of 3, but he says, my words, no matter how impressive they might be, no matter how eloquent they might be, Paul says, if they come from a motive other than love, it's just a bunch of noise. They don't mean anything. And how often have we heard people kind of use this language? Somebody will say, I love you, but we know that their actions demonstrate something totally different. We could be impressed with somebody's use of language and all of the things that go along with that. We could be impressed with people that know multiple languages, and yet their hearts are void of love. It's just a bunch of noise. What's the saying, by the way? If you know 3 languages, you're trilingual. If you know 2 languages, you're bilingual. If you know 1 language, you're American. I think that most of us are impressed with individuals that know multiple languages. It's pretty impressive, especially when you try to give it a shot and you try to learn something and you give up like the next day. That's me. But no matter how impressive they might be, if they don't speak those languages from a place of love, it's just a bunch of noise. That's all that it is. And again, let me emphasize that this does go back to these abilities that these individuals at Corinth had. Some of them could speak in languages that they had never studied before. But it meant nothing if their whole motive was to show off. And in fact, let me go ahead and say, so our words, and then also maybe our understanding. An individual could be super smart, highly intellectual, but their knowledge means nothing. Again, that's verse 2. Their knowledge means nothing if it doesn't come from a motive of love. And then in verse 3, our actions. We could sacrifice ourselves, right? And it mean nothing if it did not come from a motive of love. Why would anybody engage in things that are so sacrificial and not do it from a heart of love? Well, I think that there are probably a number of reasons. Somebody could do it just because they want to be known. Individuals could do great things for the motive of fame and notoriety, right? I don't know all of the motives, obviously, behind the person that pulled the trigger. I mean, we can pretty much figure them out by the messages that he left, right? And we can say the same thing regarding school. Usually there's some sort of writings that these individuals leave behind. They want people to know, but maybe one of them is they want to be known. They want to be known. Obviously, people can do things to be known and it not be out of love, right? People can do things in order to get attention. Maybe they just want to be praised in some way. They want to be accepted. They want people, again, to know who they are. We can do all kinds of great things, but if those things do not come from a motive of love, then they're useless, and they could even be ugly, no matter how sacrificial they might be. Without the motive of love, again, they're meaningless. So I think today, one of the things that we have to ask ourselves, when we act in the world, when we do things, the things that we do, why are we doing them? Are we doing them because of love? And I'm going to get into some definitions and some characteristics of love because Paul does in chapter 13. But I think that generally speaking, we understand that the word used for love here, agapao, and its various forms, has to do with that which seeks the best for its object. That which seeks the best for its object. So it's not about the person that is doing the loving thing, it's about the object. That's what's most important. And the object especially needs to be personal in nature. Well, what did Jesus say? If you love me, keep my commandments. Why do we keep the commandments of Christ? Is it out of a heart of love? Or is it some other motive? Well, everybody around me is doing it. This seems to be the popular thing. Again, talking about algorithms and social media, I saw a video clip of a young man that was opposed to the president, and I don't care what your political views are. I'm not getting political here, but this is illustrating a point. The interviewer was asking him, so what bad thing did President Trump do to put you in a position of being against him? And he admitted, he said, I don't know. He said, can you name one thing? No, I can't. Then why are you against him? Because everybody else is. He was on the college campus. Because everybody else is against him. That was the reason. That was the reason. So again, why do we do what we do? Is it out of a motive of love, or is it just to be accepted? Is it because everybody else is doing it and everybody else takes that position, or whatever it is? We need to be concerned about our motives. God is concerned about our motives, right? Let me hasten to say this as well, and I think that I know that I did. I brought this up in a previous sermon a few weeks ago. We do need to make sure that we understand that love in and of itself does not make us right. God is concerned with our affections, but He's also concerned with our actions, right? Again, going back to John 14:15, if you love me, keep my commandments. So He wants the love, He wants the affection, but He wants also the actions that should proceed from that. He is concerned about what we do. The example of the woman taken in adultery is a great example of this. Don't you think that Jesus loved her? We know for a fact that He did. He died on a cross in order to save her. We know that He loved her, but what did He tell her? After her accusers had left, after they dropped their stones and walked away, what did He tell the woman? Go and sin no more. Jesus is concerned with our actions. He's concerned with our affections and He's concerned with our actions. Both need to be in the right place. Both need to be from the proper motive or perspective. So, love that never fails is a love that has the right motives. In the next place, love must be personal. Love must be personal. Again, we need to understand what love is, and generally speaking, the love under consideration here is that which seeks the best for its object. But at the same time, as we look through these verses, I want you to keep in mind that this means that love is personal. The way that I put the worksheet out, I wrote the worksheet, I want you to go down that list, and I want you to put your name there. I want you to put your name there because this makes it personal, right? When we talk about all of these things that love is and what love does or does not do, does that apply to you? Now, before we get into that, I want us to go ahead and kind of go through this section and talk about what these things are. Somebody observed regarding this chapter and dissecting it, it's kind of like dissecting a flower. You know, you can dissect a flower in order to know all of its parts and understand what it does and what it's made up of and how it acts and all of those things. But once you dissect it, it kind of loses its beauty, doesn't it? And we can do the same thing with this chapter. I'll just go ahead and just put that out there because probably that's what we're going to do. We're going to get into just the details of something, and it might have a tendency to make this lose its beauty. And I don't want that to happen, but I'm just warning you ahead of time. If we go through here and we describe and we define these things, don't forget the beauty of the overall flow of this chapter and the beauty of the overall flow of the points that Paul is making. But it is important for us to know what he's talking about. So, love suffers long. That is, it patiently endures. Love patiently endures. Parents, This is a struggle for us, right? Love patiently endures. We become impatient when our kids are not listening, when they're not doing what they ought to be doing, not doing what we're asking them to do. Our love is tried in those kinds of situations. But really, it's broader than that, right? Again, we live in a dark, violent, hateful world, a world filled with people that are selfish, and we become the target sometimes in some ways. But Paul says that love endures patiently. So the question is, do you? Do you endure patiently? Do you bear with others? Do you endure unpleasantness? Think about Christ for a moment. The ultimate object of enduring patiently and enduring unpleasantness, His love was long-suffering. Love is also kind. It acts benevolently. It shows itself to be charitable and useful. We serve an omnibenevolent God, we sometimes say. What does that mean? God is all-loving. We are His children, so the question is, have we inherited that trait? And we do that by our own free will, right? We decide whether or not we are going to be like Him, benevolent. He calls on us to be. I think the King James Version is pretty useful here. It translates love or agape here as charity. And typically we think about that, somebody, they give money to a certain cause, or they give money to people that are in need, and that's charity. Well, that's an act of love when done with the right motive, right? That's an act of love, charity. But it does demonstrate what this particular love is. It acts benevolently. Love does not envy. That is, this comes from the word having to do with zeal. So it does not, and zeal has to do with boiling over. Boiling over. So love does not boil over jealousy, with jealousy. It doesn't boil over over the good fortune of another. When something good is happening in somebody else's life, maybe and your life is falling apart, you see what God is doing or what good things are happening in their life, how does that make you feel? I had a friend of mine, he was a preacher, he passed away a few years ago, but I was always impressed by the fact that I could go up to him and tell him about some good thing that had happened in my life, and he smiled, and he said, "That's wonderful, that's great." And it was almost like it was happening to him. So whatever I was experiencing that was good, he experienced the goodness of that as well. That's what love does. It does not envy. Love does not parade itself. This is the idea of boasting of oneself. This action displays little concern for others. It's look what I've done. Look what I've accomplished. Look how good I am. You remember there's a parable of the rich fool that Jesus talks about. And he talks about all the things that he's done, all the things that he's planning on doing. He talks about his barns and how he's going to build greater barns, and he's going to sit back and he's going to say to his soul, you've done well, you've got many goods stored up for many years. Eat, drink, and be merry. But the Lord said to him that night, "You fool, this night your soul is required of you." He was busy boasting about himself, parading himself. So what about you? If your name is in the blank. And by the way, here's one thing. I thought about doing this, just going through the list. Preston suffers long. Jack is kind. Roy does not envy. But I'm going to go ahead and stop there, because I figured if I kept going and I kept naming names, somebody's going to be thinking, "What do you know? Are you preaching at me?" Because there's some negative things on here too, right? But this is very personal. You need to put your name in that blank. And you need to see whether or not it describes you. So love does not parade itself. Love is not puffed up. That is, it's not prideful. It's not guilty of inflating oneself. And again, I would go back to the original context of 1 Corinthians and 1 Corinthians 13. A congregation that was filled with people who had various spiritual gifts, and it appears that they were pitting themselves against one another, bragging about whatever their spiritual gift was. Either bragging about what theirs was or being envious over what somebody else's was. And Paul says there's no place for that. There's no place for that in the Lord's body. As we continue to go through this, let me go ahead and say one more thing before I forget it. Is typically, so Paul is talking to a congregation, right? He's talking to a group of people, and I think as a congregation, as a church, as a group of Christians, we want to be known as a loving church. I think that's a noble goal, and we want to be known as that. But no group of people can be characterized by a thing without the individuals being characterized by those things. That means it's personal. If we want to be known as a loving congregation, then I've got to be known as a loving Christian, and so do you. The same thing applies to your family. A loving family or a loving community, it requires that each individual in that family or each individual in that community has to be characterized by those things. See, it's personal. It's personal. So love is not puffed up. It does not behave rudely or dishonorably. And I've already confessed to you a number of times. When I'm out in traffic and I've got to be somewhere at a specific time, it is very difficult for me to not behave rudely. I'm getting better at that. I think the more I talk about it and the more I confess, the more I remember that I need to be kind and patient, and I need to be suffering long even in traffic jams, right? It does not seek its own. It's not about seeking its own interest. That is, love looks out for the needs of others. It's not about me. It's about you. That's the way that it should be. I hope that it's that way. It's not always that way. And as we continue to go through this list, remember, this list exists because we have a problem with these things. If we didn't have these problems, then God would not put it in His book. If we weren't challenged by these things, then God would not have wasted time having somebody to write these things down. So these are very personal. It's not provoked. That is, it's not readily driven to irritation. Again, this is a hard one for me. It may be a hard one for you too. But it's easy to become easily irritated. Love is not provoked. Love thinks no evil. Rather, it's focused on good. It's focused on areas of wholesomeness. This past week has been trying, right? What are the motives of individuals? Why do they do what they do? Thinks no evil. Rejoices not in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth. It's happy at the good news and the success of others. It's hurt and it's pained at hearing about evil and good. And again, going back to the events of this past week, watching people and these things popped up on my timeline, and I had to move quickly past it, or my feed. I had to move quickly past it. And tales of individuals going to certain social media sites and talking about how people were rejoicing over this evil that has taken place. I had to move past that, and I'm still moving past that, because love next bears all things. It's protecting and preserving. It believes all things. It gives the benefit of the doubt. And again, this is a difficulty that we have, right? We see some action take place, and we might immediately go to the motives of another individual. We might surmise in an evil way. They did that because, when we have no reason why they did that. Have you ever been the target of that? You do something, if you're married, you've experienced this before probably, right? You do something, and the other person, I know why you did that. Wait a minute, maybe not. I don't even know why I did that. I don't even know why I did that. How do you know why I did that? We experience that in the world, don't we? It's common. But love believes all things. It gives the benefit of the doubt. It has faith in the things around us and even in our fellow man. when it's not necessarily easy. Somebody's at the door. If somebody can grab that for us. So it believes all things. It gives the benefit of the doubt. It has faith in our fellow man. It also hopes all things. What is hope? It's desire plus expectation. It desires that which is good, and it expects that which is good to happen. So it hopes all things. This will turn out okay. And then finally, it endures all things. In other words, it does not give up. It does not quit. It keeps on doing that which is right and honorable. So again, these are some of the things that makes love personal. It must be personal. So again, I think it's a great exercise to go through that list, to put your name in the blank, replace love with your name, and just ask yourself, does this characterize me? Is this a picture of me? And if it's not, and by the way, this is not an easy thing to do. How many of you have already put your name in those blanks? Can you go through that and not think, oh, that one stings a little bit? By writing my name in that blank, am I lying? It's a question we have to ask, right? This makes it very personal. And finally, love must be chaste. Love must be chaste. In chapter 14, verse 1, Paul begins it with, pursue love and desire spiritual gifts, but especially that you may prophesy. So we're not getting into the spiritual gifts part and the prophesying part, but there is something interesting that goes on here, and I want you to look at it in this way for just a moment, and then we'll get into this. But I've talked about the tool of chiasms before. So if you're looking at the horizon, right? You see at the bottom of the horizon, you see land, you see a beach, you see whatever it is, right? Whatever's in the foreground, and then above the horizon, you see the sky. But your eye is drawn to the horizon. What's in the middle? So this is a linguistic tool. It's a teaching tool, and I would argue that Paul is doing that here. If you look at chapter 12, verse 31, he says, but earnestly desire the best gifts. Look at that. Earnestly desire the best gifts. Now go to 14:1. Especially desire spiritual gifts, but especially that you may prophesy. All right, so those two are the same things, right? Desire the best gifts, especially that you may prophesy. That's the bottom and the top. But the bottom and the top are pointing to something in the middle, which is chapter 13 and the idea of love. And we see it even in those verses. But earnestly desire the best gifts, and yet I show you a more excellent way. What is that? Love. And then he gets into it in chapter 13. And then chapter 14 starts out with pursue love. So again, we have these two things pointing to love, which is what 13 is all about. So pursue love. It must be chased after. That's the idea. We have to chase after it. This demonstrates, and exactly what we've already seen from the previous section, it demonstrates intentionality. A person might be by nature a loving, good-mannered person, but nobody is like that perfectly, right? Everybody is potentially irritated. Everybody at some point will experience the idea of assigning the improper motives to another individual. All of us are guilty of these things occasionally. All of us are. And so this tells us that in order for us to fulfill the responsibilities of chapter 13, we have to chase after this. We have to be intentional. We have to put forth an effort in order for this to be successful. And it's worth it. It's worth it. Love is powerful and it is transforming. For just a moment, think about the person that penned these words initially. The Apostle Paul, right? But before he's known as the Apostle Paul, he's known as Saul of Tarsus, the persecutor. You go over to Acts chapter 9 and verse 1, and it describes Paul as breathing out, interesting term, breathing out threats and murder. That's the guy that wrote these words. Later on, he becomes Paul the Apostle, and he kind of ends this letter that we're talking about with these words. 1 Corinthians 16:14, let all that you do be done with love. Now, Paul goes on and he tells us in the book of Acts that everything that he did sincerely when he was persecuting the church. He was an intelligent man. He was a religious man. He was a sincere man, but he was wrong in all of those things, right? And he was filled with rage. In all of his actions against the church, he was filled with rage. And now we see him writing a chapter that is filled with love. Paul was filled with love. We certainly need to be filled with love as well. There are other examples of this. I think about the Apostle John. You remember when Jesus was still in his ministry on earth, there was an occasion when John and his brother come up to Jesus regarding those that were opposed to them. And he said, maybe you should rain down fire from heaven on these people. Remember that? And so Jesus nicknames him and his brother the sons of thunder. And yet we go to his last epistles. 1 John is an excellent example of this. And then tradition even tells us that John would be, at Ephesus, John would be carried in on a bed, put before the congregation, and he would repeatedly say, little children, love one another. My little children, love one another. So the son of thunder became the apostle of love. Love is powerful and it is transforming. But it's personal. And that needs to be our motive. Yes, the world can be a dark and depressing place, but it is our responsibility to fill it with light and with love, something far greater and something that will overcome and outlast hate and evil. Love never fails. As we wrap things up this morning, I want to encourage you to look inwardly, to look at yourself honestly, to look at yourself and not the person next to you, and just ask yourself, am I who I need to be? All of us have room for improvement, right? And the first step of major improvement begins by following Christ. And following Christ requires that we believe that He is who He claims to be, that we repent of sin. That means that we're no longer filled with hate and anger and malice, but we are overcome with love, and we want to walk in the light of His love. We want to please Him. Scriptures require us to follow Him, that we must be willing to confess our faith in Him and be baptized for the remission of sins. So this morning, as you think about yourself, honestly examine, have you taken those steps? Listen, the God that reveals those steps to us in this word is a loving God. Again, He is omnibenevolent. He is all-loving. And He demonstrates that to us by giving His Son. Romans chapter 5, John chapter 3 talks about that. For God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son. That's how much He loved. Can you imagine giving your child, sacrificing your child for an entire race of people that would hate you and hate Him? But you love them so much that you're willing to sacrifice your child for that. I can't imagine anything more difficult than that. But that's what God's love moved Him to do. This morning, how do you respond to His love? Hopefully in loving obedience. If we can help you in any way, let us know while we stand and while we sing.